Luckily, the contractor was able to revise a couple things. They brought it down the St. Lawrence Seaway, unloaded it in Duluth, and then brought it down that way versus unloading it in Baltimore and then bringing it over from there. So kind of like you say, every project always has some challenges. I've never had a bridge collapse like that across the other side of the country affect me here in Minnesota, but says we're all connected somehow, some way, and we just managed it as a team and overcame it together.
Hello, and welcome to Build Me Up with Laurisa and Kaitlin from Kraus-Anderson. Earth Day is upon us, and we are taking a deep dive into one of our most sustainable, unique projects as of late, the Washington County Central Service Center, a mass timber building in Woodbury, Minnesota. Yep, unlike many construction projects going up today, this building is largely made of wood. Joining us to talk about how mass timber could be a financial and environmental benefit for your organization's next project are Erik Jalowitz, Washington County Building Services Manager, Julie MacLeod, and Ernesto Ruiz-Garcia from Alliance Architects, and Ken Francois, Project Manager at Kraus-Anderson. Alrighty, welcome to Build Me Up, everyone. Thank you for being here. Erik, I think we'll start with you, if you'd like. We're curious what led Washington County to seek a new service center in the first place.
Yeah, so my name is Erik Jalowitz. I am the Capital Projects Manager for Building Services with Washington County. And really what we looked for in building a new service center was our old service center in Woodbury actually started off as a repurposed library. So a lot of deficiencies in that building that just didn't work well for what we were using it for. Parking was inadequate. The layout was not conducive to a license center. Often we had lines out the door, so people are waiting outside, whether it's in winter, raining, it didn't matter. Not a lot of waiting inside, inadequate. And then we also had our strategic facility plan that we completed in 2020, which identified the replacement and the relocation of this building as a high priority. One of the main goals for this building was we wanted to move it to be adjacent to transit. So to try to be as welcoming and open to as many people as we could get to. And that's why we ended up locating right across from the last stop on the new Gold Line. So the timing of that worked really well because the Gold Line completed right about the same time that this facility completed. Part of that, though, the site was smaller than ideal. It was a great site in terms of being next to transit, but it was a little bit smaller. So one of the things we did was we really wanted to focus on public-facing services. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a lot of people just sitting and working heads down in workstations. We wanted to make sure that all of the services that were going on were focused towards the public. We wanted to give the most space to the public in this building. And then the other thing we wanted to use as a goal, or some other considerations, we wanted to expand our services. So at the old service center, we just had the license center and we had our career force center. And the reason again for that was lack of parking, small building, just wasn't conducive for anything else. So some of the other things that we really wanted to look at was adding a public health clinic. It's a great spot for that, especially being adjacent to transit. An elections location. So the elections location kind of bounced around a lot. It was in our library, it was in City Hall, and it now has a permanent home in this building, which is great.
Awesome. Why don't we address the three people down the table from you? How did you get all of them involved in this project? Anyone can speak to it, how either Ernesto and Julie are architects, or Ken from KA, how did you all get involved in this project?
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Ken Francois with Kraus-Anderson Construction, a project manager. And we've been very fortunate. We've had a long-standing relationship with the county where we've been fortunate to work with them on quite a few projects, a big variety. And when this one came up, we did have to RFP it and submit on it. And luckily enough, we were successful and got to work on this one with the county and Alliance here too.
This is Ernesto with Alliance, project designer. So yeah, I attended the walkthrough for the RFP for Alliance, and like Erik said, I was fascinated by the opportunities for improvement from the previous facility. The previous facility really was kind of, it wasn't designed to be, what it was. It was really kind of dark. There was not enough space, flexibility. It was very challenging for the people that worked there and for users. So we were very excited to pursue this project as we thought the vision was really, really inspiring.
Hi, this is Julie with Alliance, project manager for the project. And like Kay, we responded to the RFP for the project. We were very excited about the opportunities, and we're very pleased to be the successful proposers for the project.
Something unique about this building is that it is made of mass timber instead of steel. I have to imagine, maybe one of you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that mass timber is a super common modality for building. How did you even decide to build mass timber? When in the process did that come up as an option for you to build with wood instead of steel?
From a county's perspective, this really came from our design team. Kind of came up with the idea and pitched it to us. They worked with Ken and the Kraus-Anderson team to make sure that all of the considerations were out there, but that's really where it came from. It was their vision, so I'll let them talk more about how they came up with that vision.
Yeah, so I think, Alliance, we have several people on our team. We've tried to do mass timbers many times. There's always, we'll get into this later on, but there are always, some challenges. It's a newer type of building type and construction, and yet wood construction is very well known and has been throughout history. So I would say the concept of mass timber came from the early days of visioning on this project when working with the county, it was clear that some of the ideas that they were connecting with, I'm thinking about we do a visual listening exercise where we kind of connect with clients about their aspirations for the project, qualitative design aspirations. And some of the things that came up were natural materials, warmth, texture and patterns, and something that's embedded in nature, which was really challenging because this site was compact and suburban, and there wasn't really maybe a strong sense of place. So the idea of placemaking on the site was really important for Washington County, and it felt like using mass timber was maybe the biggest design decision we could make to do something at that very foundational level and kind of build up from there.
And we didn't necessarily start with only mass timber. We actually had proposals for a steel building, a steel timber hybrid building, and a mass timber, and so that we could really explore what the possibilities were with all three of them. And in working with KA, we were able to determine that mass timber was really within the budget and could achieve many of the visionary things that the county and the design team were really interested in.
And Erik and the Washington County team and KA, they were on board when we were presenting these options, right? We were sharing, like, we could do this, this, or this. And I think there was this really early buy-in into the idea, right at the early schematic design level, that really made the difference.
Yeah, we were just talking as we were gathering here before the podcast about just the DMV experience that most people have, right? I don't know if anyone really is excited to go to a DMV. Like, yes, license renewal, I'm in. Let's do that Saturday.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, maybe some people do, I guess. But just that whole kind of public and client experience that the county serves, and how are they serving the public? How is the public experiencing those services? Like Ernesto and Julie said, kind of that natural environment is kind of what we all gravitate towards, and this building and this system really, kind of lended itself well to that.
Yeah, and I will say, being in the building, there's a lot of natural light. It doesn't feel, I don't know, being at the DMV in my experience can kind of feel like a dungeon. This does not feel at all like that. It's very open and airy. Just sit here with coffee and wait for your service or whatever.
It's a peaceful, it's kind of quiet out there. It's kind of peaceful. Yeah. I thought when we were, just kind of walking around. Yeah. And in our pre-meeting, I loved, I don't remember who brought it up, but just the county's history in the logging industry was kind of cool. Tying that into, bringing that into the design, I thought was clever. I don't know if there's anything else to say about that, but I wanted to make sure we mentioned that because it is, I don't think people realize when they step into a space, all of the thought that really goes into like each chair you sit in, each space you enter, there is a thought process behind the design and the feel and kind of what you said, the placemaking, making it feel like it fits in with the vibe of the community as well. It's a detailed thought process that, I don't know if we all consider that when we step into these spaces that we use regularly.
Yeah, that strong history in timber and logging, that came out early, like Ernesto said, in those visioning sessions where we were presented, the Washington County team was presented with a lot of different images, just images from around the county. And I think it's really neat that we were able to not only have that connection with nature, which Ernesto said was very important to Washington County, but then also to connect back to the county's history in kind of a very unique and meaningful way. And I think this really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I'd say, the logging, the history of logging, and we certainly talked about that as well. I think what's interesting about it was, at first, very often you're trying to find more representational ways maybe of making those connections, and I think it was really great that in this case we were able to kind of get at that. Let's just build it with wood, right? And that really makes the connection very real. And we even when we went to the building exteriors, we didn't use a lot of wood. There is there's obviously the wood framing that's on this open balcony, east-facing balcony. That's a different wood species that works better for the outside. But we did actually talk about wood cladding early on, and that we actually didn't pursue that path because of other maintenance and costs and many other reasons. But we still brought some of the warm hues and kind of the textural and pattern ideas that are kind of still inspired by those same goals to the building exterior as well, in complementing the mass timber structure.
I'm curious how building a mass timber structure is different from your average steel building. I don't know if, Ken, you want to speak to like a project management perspective. Procurement of materials, I have to imagine, can get a little different. Were there any challenges that you had to kind of overcome in putting this project together?
Yeah, great question. You kind of asked earlier on about, is mass timber common? It's somewhat of a unique structure, at least up in Minnesota. So when we had to, I guess, look at timber suppliers, it really was like a national search for different suppliers. Early on in design, we were talking to a timber supplier out of South Carolina, who was kind of helping with some input on, structural design, limits, loads, things like that. But being a public building and funding, it did have to get bid. So that was one of the considerations of our design team is we had to accelerate kind of that structural piece and bid that out separately, but also make sure we had enough time for whoever that timber supplier was selected to also have their input on the design before it was finalized and then bid out to everybody else. So when we were looking at timber bidders and contractors, we had people from Texas, South Carolina. The one we ended up going with was out of Vancouver, Canada. Some of the wood is from Canada. Some of the wood and beams are actually from Europe. So it was, I guess I should say, an international search, but being somewhat of a unique product and looking for that right contractor for this project, it was a big search that turned out really well.
I'd say a couple of the things that are interesting are the spans. So when you're planning, the grids for a mass timber structure tend to be a little bit tighter. So it's something to think about earlier on in the process. How do you space plan for a system that maybe has the columns spaced a little closer together? And another big thing that I think we learned a lot from this project, we did some things early on that really paid off, and I think there's some things we'll do next time maybe. But some of the things we did was thinking about we have this big central space for the DMV that has a big span. So keeping ducts out of that space and the ceiling. So we thought about, we have 2 mechanical rooms in the building, one on the east, one on the west, so we could distribute air without crossing that space with massive ducts. So we did underfloor in that space. And the other thing was stacking our girders and purlins in a way that allowed kind of the secondary distribution to go tight to that mass timber deck. So a mass timber deck, and when we talk about mass timber, I think the main thing that differentiates it, and maybe somebody here can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the main thing that differentiates it is the deck assembly, right? Because
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that.
so I think we have heavy timber beams all over, right? Glue-line beams are fairly common. I think that the mass timber deck is like the actual floor structure being, we had drawn the building as a CLT or cross-laminated timber. It was built as a dowel, DLT, dowel laminated timber, but it's the using of that deck as the structural element for the floor that really, I think, differentiates mass timber construction, and it's exposing that deck from underneath, which I think if you walk this building, probably close to, it's probably 90% of it is exposed as the actual ceiling finish. So it puts a lot of pressure on the coordination of systems, et cetera, because that stuff that's usually hidden in the ceiling gets to be visible.
That's a good point. You don't often think about that. Is that what we can see kind of out in the hallway here, the thin slats of wood?
That's the structure. That's the floor.
Wow.
That's the actual floor structure, So that's,
I think that's pretty special for people to be able to see like the inner workings of this building when they're just walking around in it.
And it's more than just the structure. It then means that we're exposing the sprinkler pipes and the electrical conduit. And so organizing all of that in a way, you can do buildings where you create a false floor above that deck that hides a lot of that. But in this project, we were really working on being very kind of efficient with how we spent our dollars. And it meant that we then exposed a lot of those systems and worked very closely with all the subcontractors to lay them out in very neat, orderly paths.
One of the unique things about this process is being that it's so highly coordinated and being kind of a wood structure floor. Actually, every hole that was larger than 2 inches had to be pre-coordinated with the timber because they do special reinforcing for those holes and things like that. So if you think about it, like even a water line, it gets insulation on it too, right? So pretty much any water line had to get pre-coordinated. Almost all the electrical also. So it was pretty highly intensive coordination early on in design, in that final design process to get everything right, because they'll pre-cut those holes in the factory, and when it shows up on site, your hole's there, or they got to take some in-field solutions to correct those if they need to later. So it was early on a lot of detailed coordination, not just with timber, but the whole building and all the systems. But at the end of the day, it went together well and gives you a best finished result.
And you still have your hair, so it must have gone okay.
Well, you haven't seen the backside of my head yet, right? Missing a couple back there.
Erik, are you aware as the client? Are you aware of all of that kind of thought and meticulousness that goes into it, or do you just kind of show up and you're like, what a pretty building?
There's a lot of considerations for us. Julie talked about a lot of the areas being exposed underneath. You're seeing these things, and that was part of actually the sell to the county was obviously we have to be fiscally responsible. That's one of our values as a public entity. We're using taxpayer dollars, so considering that. The system that you're using is a beautiful system to look at, and you want that exposed. And then seeing how that differs from a typical steel structure where you're hiding a lot of things. You're putting sheetrock around columns, or you're putting in false ceilings, that type of thing. There's some trade-off then, and that's balancing the look of the building with the fiscal responsibility. And how do we go about doing that? So, we were very involved from the beginning in a lot of those conversations because we needed to be able to sell this to our leadership as well to say, yes, we are making the right decision.
I did have a question that might just be for my own curiosity, but buildings made of wood, do they age differently than buildings made of steel? Is like the ongoing upkeep of the building and the structural integrity, is that different?
It's a great question. So, well, generally, right? If you look around like downtown Minneapolis, you got all those old timber buildings that were factories. They're still standing, 100+ years later. Expect the same out of this building. However, it does age a little more uniquely than a steel structure, right? You will start getting some checking or cracking in some of the beams, like you would see at an old, like the factory downtown of those buildings. And it does the wood finish kind of patinas and it kind of ages. So that's kind of the unique thing about a wood building is even if you built the exact same building, it's never going to be the same. Wood is always unique. It's going to have different grains, different appearances. Age is slightly different. So every wood timber building is going to be its own unique piece. And that's kind of the beauty of part of it too.
I think maybe more noticeable is just the annual differences. Wood expands and contracts. And so in the planning of the design and how we actually built it in many ways, you're planning for a little bit more movement in the wood systems to accommodate that expansion in the humid months and contraction in the drier months. And Minnesota, of course, has extremes.
I'll echo what some of what Julie and Ken have said, but I think that I think wood just ages really beautifully and gracefully, right? And there's just this natural aging that happens. There might be a little bit, the color changes slightly as it ages, and that's kind of part of the beauty of it. I think mass timber is, when we first started discussing this, I think, Julie, I believe I recall having some conversations where we're saying, let's not use the term mass timber. We're going to say, how about we build it with wood structure, wood construction, right? Because we all know that, and we, humanity has been doing that for centuries and centuries, right? And that's kind of something that we all know. And it turned out that nobody was scared of the term, right? But I think at first we were like a little bit cautious because we have had some clients who, when you bring something that seems to be like a little bit edgy or on the right on the cutting edge of like building systems that are out there, maybe a little more cautious. So we appreciated everybody's like motivation to do this, and yeah,
it's funny that we say a building type that has been around for hundreds of thousands of years is cutting edge, right? But it's an interesting perspective that it's not done often up here in the past however many years, so it does kind of become around as cutting edge again.
Yeah. And there's I think there's obviously kind of a building code, building types kind of part, which is what mass timber is like a new classification, right? There's a new ways that now you can build with wood that you couldn't a few decades ago. But it's just as safe.
That's what we were really getting at.
Kaitlin has this question that I think is kind of funny, but also interesting for Julie and Ernesto. What goes through your head when you're asked to design a mass timber building? Because, nowadays, are you excited? Is it, what is the thought process or what is the feeling behind it?
Sure, I'll start. There's a little bit of, maybe we internalize it a little bit more, but there's a little bit of a kind of an excitement about, this is a great opportunity, not only for doing something that can express, the vision of the client, but also it is a sustainable and a durable product process. And it really allows you to be a little bit maybe more honest with your finishing of your building, is that you don't need to apply those additional layers that people have mentioned earlier today. You're really just expressing the actual material. And I think that's also exciting.
Yeah, I think Julie nailed it. But I think every time we have the opportunity to work with really kind of simple materials that people know and connect with, it's something that I think designers we get really excited about. there's, I think that I recall the early conversations about this, about, people that come here are already stressed. And how do we create an environment that's not stressful? So I think for certain projects, I think wood and other natural materials just have this quality to them that allow people to relax and feel connected to something bigger, right? To nature. So I think that's how I think the county sees itself. So I think for this project, mass timber just made a lot of sense, and we got super excited about the opportunity. Obviously, that wouldn't be maybe, it's not the right system for every single project out there, but.
How do you determine which project it's the right system for? What kind of considerations go into that? What if somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh, I want to build a new building, I'm kind of interested in mass timber.
I would say first maybe there is a certain size, and I don't have the code book in front of me, but there are some building heights and site and area limitations that would trigger the mass timber getting all covered up. So you can build mass timber, as skyscrapers nowadays. You probably wouldn't see any of it. So I would personally be less excited about a mass timber building that we would have to go and hide it all, because I think you would lose some of the benefits. But there's other span considerations. We do have I think a 54-foot span over the DMV, which created some challenges. We're able to achieve it with doubling up girders. But there's some programs that mass timber wouldn't be a great system for, just because of those longer spans. Like if you need super flexibility, you want column-free space, etc.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Somebody mentioned sustainability earlier too. I'm curious to get into. We're releasing this sort of around Earth Day-ish. What are those sustainability benefits of building with mass timber? And I will admit to a little bit of ignorance. My thought was if you're cutting down a bunch of trees, how is it sustainable? So can anyone speak to that and kind of the sustainability benefits of building with wood?
Well, I know just from a hierarchy of building materials, wood has the least amount of embodied carbon. I know concrete is kind of rings the bell, and then steel, and then other materials. So just from that standpoint, starting out, right, wood is a renewable resource, even though it doesn't seem like it might be, but by LEED standards, it actually is and can regenerate itself in a certain time period that qualifies it for sustainable materials, but also has kind of that least amount of embodied carbon as well.
Well, and it also depends on wood sourcing. So if it's from the wood is managed, it comes from a responsibly managed source, right? So I think I think in this case it was PEFC sourcing, which is different from a couple of the other ones that some people are familiar with, but that's a big part of it, right? So if it's responsibly sourced and it's managed for that purpose, then it's all positive.
And these aren't old growth forest products. These are those sustainably managed timber.
Yeah, grown for this purpose.
Grown for this purpose. And so that's an important piece of it as well.
There are some other sustainability features as well that went into this project. Does anyone want to call those out? I have a list of them, but somebody can let us know what you got going on.
You bet. I can name some of them, and I'll if I miss anything, please jump in and add. But some that are just at the top of mind, we have native plantings on the site, which allows us to have minimal irrigation, which saves water. We did maximize glass on the north-facing elevation, so we're providing natural light without heating up the building, so access to natural light without that solar gain. We do have a solar array on the roof, so this is a first for Washington County. We've often explored solar, but this is the first building that we've actually put solar on, so there's some new energy plans and ideas out there for how to be more sustainable and environmentally responsible of the county. We have high efficiency boilers, destratification fans that reduce our heating load. some demand control ventilation, so the ventilation only turns on when it needs to, not all the time. We do have bird-safe glass, another first for us. We don't have bird-safe glass anywhere else. Obviously, we talked about the mass timber construction, but then also electric vehicle charging stations. And then the other thing, we utilize the Excel's Energy Design Assistance Program, which allows us to look into any other things that are out there, any rebates. What are we not thinking of? They help us out through that too.
Bird safe glass.
I was going to ask that same
What
question.
is that? I love that because
It's right there. How does that work?
is it just like more reflective or less? I don't know.
It has a frit pattern on it that birds can see, so they don't fly into it.
When they see their reflection, they tend to think that it's, I don't know, another bird, it's a clear sky, and they literally fly into the glass. And so this breaks that reflection.
Oh, how cool.
Okay. Huh. I don't know if you touched on this, Eric, too, but the fact that this building is located along mass transit lines, too, I think that probably plays a big part into the sustainability of the building itself, too.
Absolutely. Not only sustainability, obviously it gives anyone an opportunity to get here without everyone driving their vehicle, which reduces the carbon footprint, but it also expands the availability of the services to those that don't have reliable transportation. So not only the sustainability, but the inclusivity of the services it helps with.
I think another piece is that, as was mentioned earlier, we're on a kind of constrained site. And so while requirements of the city are for a certain number of parking stalls, we were really not able to achieve quite that level. But because of the adjacency to the Gold Line Transit Center and that ability to commute potentially through the bus system. We're also on some trails, so bike trails that you can bike, and we've got bike racks so you can lock them up. So it really is increasing that inclusivity, but also kind of balancing the need for parking and other site factors such as the stormwater retention and the native plantings and other pieces to make it a kind of a calming and sustainable site.
The other thing I think is, unique or just how it was designed and the services that the building has, right? It's not just a one-service building. You can come here, you can vote, get your license, get your tabs, your passport, you can get a health checkup. So while you're waiting in the DMV line, however, they might be shorter now, but while you're waiting, you can go vote. You can take care of a lot of different things in one location that's easy to get to, which also saves multiple trips and just doesn't waste people's time either. So it's a very efficient building for the end users as well.
I think I want to lean in on a couple things. So Eric mentioned solar orientation of windows. One of the first things that we looked at, which is also a sustainable decision, was rotating the building. I think they had the county had a pre-design that had the building in a north-south orientation. So rotating the building 90 degrees is better for managing heat gains and from solar. So that was one decision we made that I think had a lot of impact. And then the other one, Julie was talking about how the site is really kind of welcoming and kind of does a lot. It's a very small site, but this building orientation really presents itself similarly to anybody, regardless how they arrive. So you can arrive by transit, you arrive by car, you arrive by bike, but the building is always facing the direction that people are arriving, regardless of how they do that. And we have this really, we found the space in the site to create some nature on the building, to have some views out the window that are actually not a parking lot, and to create this really clear path from the transit center right through the site, really clear, protected, safe path to the front door of the building. And then in the front door of the building, we have built-in benching around the front in a very comfortable plaza. And so a lot of buildings don't have the opportunity to create that, right? But letting people pause and be able to sit on the building, while they're waiting for the ride, or if they want to collect their stuff before they even go inside. So it's kind of a comfortable, I would say, outdoor experience.
And it's really tied to some of the kind of new approaches that especially the licensing center instigated. You've got you can sign in on your phone, you can log in electronically, and it means that you don't need to sit right in front of the desks. And so you can go out and enjoy either the public plaza on the front of the building or the more private area along the hillside here and wait, as well as multiple places within the building. Or as Ken mentioned, you can go vote if that's going on. So it really, that flexibility of how you actually use the service center is really well integrated with the building itself.
So you no longer have to stand in a single file line out the door, and regardless of the weather, you have a lot of different options, which is great.
I'm very impressed by how the level of, not that I would expect less, but the level of thought and cohesion that has gone into this building, and every aspect of the project seems to feed the better interest of another aspect, like the transit for the public getting here, and then all their services are in one place, and we're considering the environment, and we're considering aesthetic and people's, emotional well-being, a calm space to be in. I think that's very impressive. If you're able to share, if you're willing to share, were there any hiccups in this project that maybe didn't go as smooth as the building looks like? Everything went off without a hitch. Were there any fun,
or just like unique challenges to?
Every meeting was a group hug.
Yeah, that's why I still got the hair on the back part of my head, right? Yeah, like every project, right? There's always a couple of challenges in construction. One of them being we're dealing with a finished product, basically from the moment you start, right? So the wood is all exposed, the ceiling, everything's exposed. So one of the lessons learned from me is just the level of care the contractors took around the wood. Probably led to a little bit longer duration in construction than we normally would see, because you got to be careful around things. If you're digging a hole with a backhoe right next to a column, right, you got to be a little more careful how you do that. So that was one of the things, I guess, a lesson learned from me. Another one was kind of a unique challenge, or fun challenge. Fun story at the end of it was being that the wood was sourced from multiple areas. We actually were getting our beams and columns from Europe, and they were scheduled to arrive in the Baltimore port 3 weeks after the bridge was collapsed, which presented a new problem for us, right? We're sitting here, sites open, ready for work, and we might not be able to get our building materials to site. Luckily, the contractor was able to revise a couple things. They brought it down the St. Lawrence Seaway, unloaded it in Duluth, and then brought it down that way versus unloading it in Baltimore and then bringing it over from there. So kind of like you say, every project always has some challenges. I've never had a bridge collapse like that across the other side of the country affect me here in Minnesota, but it kind of says we're all connected somehow, some way, and we just managed it as a team and overcame it together. So,
I think another challenge was we had probably the rainiest spring in decades, just at a time when we were beginning our site work and laying the foundations for the mass timber that was supposed to arrive. And so the challenge of just working through all of that mud on the site and getting rid of the water to be able to dry it a little bit.
How do you do that? Is it a vacuum?
Yeah, it's a pump, essentially, right? You pump it from one pond to another, out of our building pond to an actual pond made for water. The other thing we did, we planned ahead of time. We had quite a bit of access roads kind of planned already around the building, knowing that, how you erect it or work around your building and sequence it. So we used all of that rock and then some to make stable building foundations for people to work.
I think we also had some, maybe a little more of a scheduled challenge during bidding, after bidding, when the system we had to basically reconsider our deck assembly from CLT to change it to a DLT system. And, construction documents are very, very well coordinated things of beauty, right? So when the thickness of your deck changes, suddenly some of the mechanical coordination that I was mentioning before had to be kind of reconfirmed. Perforations, maybe like the structural capacity at the perimeter of a DLT deck is different than that of a CLT deck. So some of our exterior perimeter details had to be revisited. So there was some fun, revisiting of some of those earlier decisions that were well worth the effort.
Yeah, and kind of like Ernesto was hinting at, is each timber specialize in kind of some unique different construction techniques. So again, getting that mass timber expert on early really helps kind of lead your design. Kind of the difference between the cross-laminated timber CLT is essentially the boards kind of crisscross each other and overlap each other, and that's how they're glued. So kind of the cross-laminating, right? Versus the DLT, which is dowel laminated, where the boards are basically on and then glued together vertically. So you can imagine, depending on your thickness, like you say, your deck could be different between if you laminate it laying flat versus laminate it laying on edge. Can lead to different challenges on how you assemble a building.
I mean, and it was like the DLT is beautiful. I mean, that's what's giving you that really striated look on the ceilings when you look at that. You're seeing the short end, the short side of the vertical piece of wood. So it would have looked different with a CLT deck.
Well, it was being a public entity, right? It had to get bid out, and the design kind of got us to like a design development level, not fully completed construction documents. And then it was bid out to all the timber contractors exclusively, I guess, the first bid package. And then depending on what their specialty was, the team was able to adapt to the right system that specialty contractor provided. And then the second bid package was everybody else in construction after kind of some of those details and things like that were worked out before construction documents were done.
So it kind of came down to a price point, I'm guessing, as to why you would choose CLT versus DLT.
And the bidders, right? Being a public entity, you gotta bid it out publicly, and depends who's successful and what their system that they have capabilities to do. Kind of also dictates that final design a little bit as well.
Yeah, our engineers engineered those design intent documents to a level that we could bid it, and then each bidder has their own engineers, and they're the ones who really certify the overall design. And so I think it came down to what their engineers determined was maybe the most efficient, effective system within their timber offerings.
Have you gotten feedback on the building? If anyone wants to speak to, what's like the best piece of feedback?
Any anecdotes?
Yeah, I can provide one. Actually, this one came from my wife. She works downtown in Ecolab, and she had a coworker that was moving from Hudson to Woodbury. And part of that, you have to change. You're going from Wisconsin to Minnesota, so you have to change your driver's license. So she was talking with her coworkers, and they said, whatever you do, do not go to the license center in Woodbury. It's terrible. It's an awful experience. And of course, they were talking about the old building with the old library, the lines out the door, there's no place to wait. And she was running late. She had to get this done. So she just thought, I'm just going to go to Woodbury. It's close. I'll get it done. She came in the next day and was asking her coworkers, what exactly were you talking about? I went into this beautiful new building. I walked up to a kiosk, got a number. As I was waiting for my time, I walked around this building and just loved everything about it. I have no idea what you're talking about. And then my wife overheard that and said, well, yeah, that's the building actually my husband helped to build, and it's brand new. And so now everybody's excited. We're like the DMV to go to now, which is fantastic.
5-star DMV.
You'll have your own reality show probably soon.
It's a hard ticket to get.
Right.
Or not. There's no more lines up there.
Yeah.
You're right. Hot ticket.
To have a building like this that's been so successful in so many different ways, it takes a strong partnership with a good design team, a good construction manager. Ernesto kind of joked about the group hugs, but I think the team worked really well together. Part of that is just being honest with one another. Part of that is, leaning out of your comfort zone maybe and leaning on the other partners and having a lot of trust. And that this project is a great example of having that great partnership.
One of the main feeders.
Inspecting your work.
Well, I mean, to Julie's point about the wood moving, right? So this joint is not a hard joint. It's not drywall. It's a rubber seal like you can see on like a door that ties into the wood. So when it expands, it doesn't crack your drywall. So all of these,
That's cool.
on all the columns and things like that.
I think that's a big thing so there is the level of construction attention to detail for the contractors, the painters, for that whole phase, because they're not just building one sheetrock wall over a series of studs. There are studs, but they're stopping at every single column and they're treating that edge carefully. And then the painters have to come in and carefully not slap paint all over the, so it does require a different level of attention to detail that isn't present in some other buildings. Not to say that contractors aren't attentive, but just that did not come out how I wanted it to.
No, some more than others, right?
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes.
Yeah, but it's a difference, and I think what I've noticed with a lot of the subs is that they really appreciate being challenged, or being able to really practice their art, their skill in how they complete the building.
Pride and craftsmanship, right?
Yes.
And
Thank you. Cut out what I said.
no, I was gonna say I hope you're still recording, because what Julie just said before.
Yeah.
Okay, well you should put that into the but pride and craftsmanship, and then results in pride and ownership, right? Like all these things. Yeah.
That might be our title. Usually we pick up the title, something
Somewhere.
that someone says will become the title of the episode.
Yeah,
I think you should call it
that.
group hug.
You can do that too.
Nice.
One of those two, definitely. Yeah. You get the credit. Oh, well, thank you so much, everyone, for talking to us today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That wraps up this episode of Build Me Up. Be sure to check back in every month on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.